And we're live. Yes, here we are. Right on.
Once again, here we
One more
go.
time.
One more time. Another week, man. Another week.
Till the next time we do one more time. Morning. Chuman, how are you?
I am doing fantastic, brother. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Trinity, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Glad you're here.
Old faithful.
So, today we're going to talk about um, something that is usually discussed in the context of comics, right? That's where it normally pops up.
Mm-hmm.
I guess a lot of other movies might have it too. We're going to talk about Sidekicks, and we're talking about also signs, which is not just exclusive to comics. So we're talking about the signs that God's going to give to Moses. So we're in our deliverance story series. If you are hopping in and you're watching either the live stream or you're hopping into this as a replay video, you may want to go back and because you're kind of jumping into the middle of the story. But we are talking about this deliverance story in Exodus, the story of Moses, and the deliverance of the nation of Israel, the people of Israel. And so, if you're jumping in, this is your first one, you may want to go back a bit. But today we're going to be carrying on. And anything you got, Chuman?
No, I'm excited for this chapter. There's also good application with ideas of doubts and back to that whole hero's journey and everything that we can just take personally and understand that Moses was chosen by God and he had a lot of doubts. So if you are out there and you have doubts in your life and fears, you're not alone. It's very normal, very normal.
It's normal. It's actually part of the whole process, right?
Yep.
And so let's go ahead and take a look, or at least have a little discussion here. So last time when we were looking at this story, Moses actually met up with Yahweh, the Creator, and he met him in a most unlikely of conference rooms, which was a burning bush of sorts. And it's a pretty famous part of the story. Most people know it. And so we have this meeting here, and basically this was the call. This is the call of the hero to go and to accomplish this. And normally with the call, if we are going back to the hero's journey, there are sort of those times where the call's rejected. And so I think this chapter is where you're kind of seeing that rejection. Go, I'm not going to go, or who am I? You're questioning being called. So that's essentially what we have in this. And so we're in Exodus chapter 4. If you want to follow along, you can go ahead and do that. We are going to put it up on the screen, or you can just listen. We'll try to read the sections that we're pointing out. But yeah, we start to hear some of the doubts. And I think when we start this chapter here, God is trying to almost get ahead of it. He knows that Moses has doubts, and so he's getting ahead of that to try to address them early on, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So let's go ahead and let's take a look.
Here we are. Yeah, it comes out that Moses just doesn't want to do it. It's not like he keeps bringing up these points to God, like, well, I can't do this, I'm not good at this, and it finally, pretty much, God knows his heart. That he just doesn't want to. He's resisting. He's comfortable where he's at, shepherd in Midian, just kind of wait until he dies, right? And now he's getting called to do this crazy adventure at 80 years old, and he's like, oh my, I don't want to do this. I'm sure we can all relate to that. How many times you have to you feel God placing something on your heart, and you're like, I don't want to do that, and then obviously he lights a fire under your butt, trying to get you to do it. So you can relate to Moses quite a bit here.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if we can relate to being 80 years old and thinking I'm retired, but you're absolutely right. This is something that happens all the time, right? Mm-hmm. Even in small instances, like, oh man, I have to go do that thing.
Yeah.
But normally it's like, oh, I have to go. My wife and I are more introverted. We'd rather kind of stick around at home or just kind of hang out doing our thing. So it's always like, oh, we got to go do a thing where people are. That's sort of our thing. Maybe that was Moses' thing. Maybe he enjoys being by himself out in the wilderness,
Well,
just him and the sheep.
look at the last time he tried to help his people. They didn't really treat him very well.
It's
Like
true.
you know what I mean? So he's like, "What? I tried to help these guys, and look what happened. They all freaking tattled on me."
It did that 40 years ago. It didn't turn out so well.
Yeah.
Yeah, quite possibly. So we look here at chapter 4. You have Moses. Moses answers again. So this is a continuation of the conversation, and says, and if they don't believe me or they don't pay attention to me, but say the Lord has not appeared to you, the Lord says to him, "What is in your hand?" He says, "Oh, it's a staff." All right, so he has this. Maybe it's a walking stick, most likely an implement for shepherding. Oh, I've got a staff. The Lord says, "Throw it on the ground." So he does what he's told, and it becomes a snake, which is not normal.
I wouldn't say that's normal, no.
It's an abnormal thing. You don't expect your staff to turn into a snake, but it did.
Especially with the symbolism of what a snake, the Akash, stands for. Obviously in the Hebrew. So
Yeah, and it's interesting because, and we're not going to get to it in this story, but much later on, that symbolism of snakes is used again, and it's actually used of Jesus later on, which is also interesting that the snake is used. But we digress. Here he, verse 4, Lord said to Moses, and remember, the capital Lord, that is the covenant name for God. So this is Yahweh. Yahweh says to Moses, "Put out your hand and grab it by the tail," which I always heard was the wrong way to interact with a snake, but Steve Irwin taught us different. So apparently you do grab it by the tail, and that keeps them more calm. But anyway, the snake's not going to have time to really calm down, because as soon as he does grab it, it turns back into a staff in his hand.
So I want to just point out something with this little section, because it's really cool diving into it. So the reason why it is a snake, because obviously the symbolism of Satan, the Kosh, and then for Yahweh to tell him to grab it by the tail, what it's doing is, because as a shepherd, he would have known that you grab the snake by the head to control it. Grabbing it by the tail is God showing Moses, you need to have faith in me. Say, I control this. Don't worry about it. And also the symbolism between the snake and then Egypt, like the Pharaoh. Obviously, the Pharaoh had his headdress that was a cobra that symbolized the snake. This whole event goes back to Yahweh showing Moses, I'm in control. Don't have faith in me. The snake is a symbolism, obviously, here with that as well, of Egypt and everything. So I just found that really fascinating.
Yeah,
it's really cool little part of it.
Yeah, and that's scary, right? You grab it by the tail if you don't know what you're doing and those different things. Yeah, absolutely. Turns back into a staff. Verse 5, they may believe that Yahweh, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has appeared to you. And again, we talked about this last time. These are all present tense verbs. This is him saying, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, God, Yahweh is still God of them. They're still here. They're not gone forever. That sort of idea of that life after death sort of thing. But so then he moves on. He says, you need another. So he's going to give him 3 signs here. So the second one is he puts his hand in his robe. He takes it out. And it's leprous. So leprosy is talked about in the Bible quite a bit, but normally it is it was not curable. But normally for them, it is this symbol of being unclean. It is a symbol of basically that your life's over, right? If you have leprosy, and it was something you could not get rid of. It was also something that appeared over time. So the fact that he could put his hand in his cloak, in his robe, and he'd pull it back out, he's got leprosy. And then he's like, oh, I got leprosy. And then he puts it back into his robe, takes it back out, and now he's clean again. It's healed. Is quite a miracle in that day and age. And it does touch on quite a few different things.
Wait, so you're telling me they did not have cream that could just heal that?
a lotion, some sort
Yeah.
of a
All right. I just want to clarify that. All
a
right.
lotion. Yeah, they didn't have the lotions. They
Yeah, they
didn't have.
can go down to CVS and just get a little lotion.
No, see, and I don't know. Maybe they did have CVS, but they didn't have anything for this.
Yeah, it was probably just like goat milk and stuff. Like, just here you
Yeah,
go.
so like I don't know, it's not working. But they like yeah, then all of a sudden he was healed. So this was a big time. This is another thing where God is God over things that man has no control over, right? So this is that symbol. Today, even today, leprosy can be taken care of, but it's through a process. It's not an instant sort of thing. So even today, this would be impressive, even though there's a pill I believe you can take, a course of medication you can take to take care of leprosy.
But it doesn't work instantly. Nothing does.
Doesn't work instantly, right? Armadillos have leprosy, don't they?
I've heard so. Even though
Yeah.
they're adorable, then they bring that plague.
Yeah. So don't touch. If you remember nothing else from this, don't mess with armadillos. I hope you remember more than that. But that's another one of the signs. And then he has a third one. And the third one is really interesting because it's something that is, well, we'll see here in a second. So he tells them to, he doesn't show it to him. This is the other interesting part, right? So God shows him these two signs. The third one, he doesn't show him. He just tells him it's going to work. And if they don't believe, verse 9, if they don't believe these two signs or listen to you, then take some water from the Nile and pour it out on the dry ground. The water you take from the Nile will be blood on the dry ground.
Yeah. Yep. What's cool, we're obviously going to get into this later on about all the plagues symbolize the Egyptian gods and how they worship. And this goes back to how obviously Egypt had them all throw the babies into the Nile, right, to the Nile god. And it was a way of them helping their conscience of like, oh, it's up to the Nile god. It's not them killing the babies. The Nile god is going to decide if the babies die or not. And back to then why then he turns that water to blood. This is also another kind of symbolism of turning that water to blood, which we'll go in later when that part comes into the battle of the gods. But
yeah. And this is interesting because water, well, even where Moses is, water is life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Definitely for Egypt, one of the things that they worshipped was the cycle of the Nile. The fact that every year it would flood, that would bring this fertile soil, basically help to fertilize their crops, and then it would go back to normal, and then the next year it would do it again. So basically, there's this cycle with the Nile, and also just water in general in Egypt. It's an arid area. It's a symbol for life. So then for that symbol of life turn to death is really poignant.
Yeah, well, especially when they worship that as a god, the Nile god and the water and everything. So again, it comes back to Yahweh showing he's in control of everything. He is the Most High. He is the true living God. He controls it, not this Nile god or this god over here. He is.
Even just natural processes. He's the God who accomplishes that. Mm-hmm. Right? He is the one in control of those things. So it's pretty amazing because here's these three signs. Two of them he sees. One of them he has faith will take place. Maybe he doesn't yet. But the next statement that Moses makes is interesting. This is the rejection of the call. So if you look at verse 10, Moses says, "Oh, my Lord," and you'll notice he just calls him master. He does not use his covenant name. He says, "Oh, Lord, I'm not an eloquent man, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant, for I'm still slow of speech and slow of tongue."
So I have heard a different opinion on this, that a lot of people take this as, oh, he wasn't a good speaker. But from the Near East and Mideast understanding of that Hebraic term, it's more him being humble to God, pretty much just saying, like, who am I to do this? Who am I to say this stuff? Like, again, because he also grew up in Egypt. He had the best teaching. He had the great education. Stephen even talks about, before he gets martyred, about Moses and him speaking and everything. So the interpretation that, because a lot of people will take this away as, oh, well, he had a speech impediment or he didn't speak well, but look what God can use, which, again, that could be it. But I also heard another way of that does not mean this. It's a way of him being humble. It's a Near East way of speaking. Again, who knows? I don't.
It very well could be, and I've heard that as well. One of the things that it's sort of interesting is he makes this little statement here: neither in the past nor since you've spoken to me, which might be like, even when I was in Egypt, I couldn't do this.
Mhm.
But it could also be bigger. It could also be, I don't have a platform. Like, who am I?
Yeah.
The eloquence matter of it may be more of any authority that comes behind his words. It's like, even if I do these signs, I'm still me. Like,
Yeah.
I can't do this thing. I don't
Yeah.
have any position. I don't have a place of power to speak. And so it could be one of those things. It could be all of those things. Maybe he did have a speech impediment. Who knows?
Well, because look back to when he actually did try to talk to the Israelites fighting, and then what do they say to him? Oh, look at you! You're the one that killed the Egyptian man. You know, like so. Again, him speaking to these guys clearly did nothing, and so he's neither in the past or since. Like, I obviously can't speak to these my people; they don't listen to me.
Right. Yeah. So it's any one of those.
Yeah.
It could be one of them, could be all of them. But at whatever point he says, I can't do this.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I love the idea that he had a speech impediment and God can use, because later on you see how God talks right here with verse 11 and said to him, who gave a mouth to man, who makes a person mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it
Right.
not I, the Lord? Now, this isn't a fatalistic type of way. It's just God's showing how powerful he is, that he can use anybody, anyone for his purpose and his will. So either way, either interpretation of it, I love the idea of each one.
Yeah. Either any of them work, because the point
Yeah.
is Moses is challenging God to say, I can't do this.
Yeah.
So it really doesn't. It's funny because it really doesn't matter what it is.
At the end of the day, it's just details of of it. It's, yeah.
And I've heard it to be like, even if I've heard it even taught to say, even if you have something that keeps you from doing things that you think, like, maybe it is you have a fear of public speaking, God can overcome that. You have a whatever that might be. I've heard it used that way, and it may not be that at all.
Mm-hmm.
It may be the fact that Moses, it could also be like what you said, like, that's not me. Maybe he's like, send my son. Who knows what was in his mind when he rejected this. It does seem to go along with this idea that he has some sort of inability because how the Lord responds. So that may be at least one of the factors, because of how he speaks in verse 11. Verse 11, he says, who gave a mouth to man, and who makes a person mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not me, the Lord? Uses the covenant name for himself again, Yahweh. Isn't it Yahweh who does all these things?
Yep.
Which also is interesting because, and this is why I also kind of hold to the idea that it at least does have something to do with how he speaks, because the point is God chooses people who can't do it themselves, so that it's God, it's seen as specifically God who does it through someone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even says in Corinthians, who does God choose? He chooses the unwise. He chooses the weak.
Yep.
To make foolish the wise, and to make foolish the strong, right? So I think that's at least a part of it. Is, well, we all know it would be interesting because people in the court would be like, oh yeah, we remember Moses.
Yeah.
He can't talk.
Yep.
And then he would talk, right? And so then it would be like, oh wow, look, he's speaking with this kind of authority. So you have some of those things there as well, and I think you can draw out of this that idea that even if you have this inability, if God's calling you to do a thing, you're going to be able to do it. Not because it's you, but then at the end you can say, wow, look what God did. Like, it's much easier for you to recognize, wow, God is the one who did these things through me, instead of you thinking, look, I did all these things myself. Look how amazing I am. I shouldn't have been able to do this, but I did it. I pulled myself up by my bootstraps and I accomplished a thing. And I think that's one of the things that God wants to do. He chooses those who would be the most unlikely to accomplish some of these things, so that they could say, wow, this was something out of the ordinary. This was a miracle. This is, not what we expected from this person.
Oh, it's great application. And that's one thing I've learned in my walk with the Lord. Usually when you don't want to do something, it's the Lord wanting you to do it. If it's something that like, if say like say you're somebody and you want to be a pastor really bad, you probably shouldn't be a pastor. Like, like if you you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like usually the people that are great pastors are ones that like Moses resisting it. I don't want to do this. Like I don't want to, but God's like, no, this is what you're calling is, or whatever calling it is, wherever it may
sure.
be. Again, usually when you have something that God is calling you to do and you don't want to, that's most likely a good confirmation that it's God calling you to do it.
Yeah. And sometimes, and then you can get excited about the call with recognition, like, I don't know how
Yeah.
I'm going to do this thing. You're just excited to do it. And that's, I think one of the differences, obviously, with a call that someone gets. But if you want to put this into like just a story kind of understanding, here we go back into the hero's journey. This is rejection. Like, I can't do this thing. Who am I to do this thing?
Hmm.
It's Luke Skywalker saying, I can't be a Jedi. Like, I don't even know what I'm doing. Just take me back home. And then he sees his crispy aunt and uncle, and then decides, all right, let's get out of here. But it's that I can't do this thing. And I think we can all think of some examples of the reluctant hero. I just don't know, but it just keeps coming back, and it keeps coming back to them, like, I guess I gotta go and do this thing, right? So
Well,
I think, yeah,
what's so
go ahead.
beautiful too, it goes back to the humility. God, he resists the proud but gives grace to the humble. His people, he only can work through someone that has humility. He can't work with pride. He can't do it, and he won't do it.
Right.
Again, look at Pharaoh. You have the two different, perspectives. You have Pharaoh filled with pride, and you have Moses full of humility. And who does God work through? He works through Moses. So,
Yeah. And we love an underdog story. We love that hero where, like, they're scrapping. We don't know how they're going to do it.
it's funny. You bring up the underdog thing. I forgot the exact quote. I just heard Brendan Fraser say like, underdogs aren't underdogs, they're champions that everyone overlooked. Or something
Yeah.
like something super cute because he's a little national treasure. But yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's that, and I think we love the reluctant hero. We love the hero that doesn't look like they'll be a hero, who also pops up. I think Spider-Man becomes that for a lot of people because
Yeah.
he's just a kid. To quote Chunk, I'm just a kid, and he's like, it's just a dude in spandex, right? That's always kind of the joke. Like, who are you? You're just some kid in spandex, and all of a sudden he is a hero, right?
He's Spider-Man.
If you go back to the MCU, the early days of the MCU, Captain America, the most unlikely hero, is then given the abilities not because he already was a great hero, but because he was the right kind of man, right? He was the right kind of man to do it.
Side note, that's my favorite right there, Captain America. You want to know
Yeah.
what sealed my Captain America as my favorite?
What?
It was in the first Avengers movie when Thor jumps out and they're fighting or whatever, like Iron Man, and then Captain America's about to jump out, and then Black Widow's like, "Be careful, they're practically gods," and he's like, "Don't worry, ma'am. There's only one God." And he does. I'm pretty sure doesn't wear or dress like that. And he jumps out. I'm like, yeah, I'm
That
like,
was a
all right.
great line.
Exactly, it's my favorite line in the whole movie. I'm like, all right,
That was great. And that perspective there too, just like, it really doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. I'm just going to go do the right thing. And I think that's one of the things we love about a lot of heroes is it. Yeah, it's insurmountable odds, but we just got to go do the right thing. And I think
overcoming.
that,
It's overcoming
yeah,
the fears. Overcoming the fears is huge because we all experience it in little things or big things in our life.
and I think the payoff is in Endgame. Spoilers for Endgame. Is that real for anything?
If you haven't watched it yet,
Uh,
then I think it's okay.
Seriously, yeah. If you remember, there's that moment where it's just Captain America standing there, and all of Thanos's armies and everything is, and he's like, all right, I just have to go do the right thing. Like, I just have to fight this entire army. And then of course the portals show up, and then everybody else wakes up, got knocked
Mhm.
out. But that's that moment where he's like, I'm just gonna have to do this. And I'm sure if he started to be like, I could do this all day, right? He's this classic phrase where
Mhm.
I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to keep going until I can't go. And I think those are the things that we love about heroes. Here's the thing with Moses. He doesn't embody any of that. Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. At this
No.
point, he's still like, I can't do this thing. Who am I? Who am I to do that? You might be right. Who am I? Oh, who am I to be called to do this thing. But then even if in that humility, it's almost false humility, because you look around and be like, you're right. Why you? You're in the middle of nowhere. So it's not a false humility or even just a gesture. It's just, no, you just can't do this thing. And then, yeah, this part. So the Lord says, who gave man a mouth, right? I'm the one who does all these things, so that Moses has the opportunity to say, you're right. I trust you. I'm going to go. But Moses says, oh, Lord, please, again, does not use Yahweh. He just says, Master, please send anyone else whom you wish to send. So say, Moses is giving permission to Yahweh to send anyone else except for him. I know that we're talking about humility, but that almost sounds like arrogance.
Mm-hmm.
God, you can send anyone else except for me. That's very interesting to me. But verse 14, then Yahweh became angry with Moses. It says that this is what I love about the phrase, right? It says in Hebrew, it says, and his anger was kindled. So it's using the fire words. It's like you're talking literally to fire.
Yeah. He's
right?
gonna start. Yeah.
The anger is kindled. Say, Moses, you don't get it. You aren't being chosen because you are great. You're being chosen because you are going to be that man. Moses said, what about Aaron? I'm sorry. And Moses, he was angry with Moses, and he said, the Lord said, what about your brother Aaron, the Levite? I know that he can speak well. It's like, okay, how about Aaron? How about him? He can speak.
Does it ever get does it get into it, or could you assume that it could also mean that Aaron has a good reputation with the Israelites?
Yeah, I think you can take it from any of those different places, right? Maybe he does speak, which is interesting because it's God telling Moses he speaks well. It's God using the same terminology and verbiage that Moses used. And we don't know if it's just God making fun of Moses.
Yeah, it could
Well,
be.
Aaron, I guess, is better than you at this thing. Why don't I send him? And we don't get this from Moses. I have a brother. So it could very well be that when his mother was caring for him when he was young, that he knew he had a brother.
Mm-hmm.
That it wasn't a mystery.
I think it's assumed. Yeah.
And it's Aaron the Levite, which is also interesting. Identifies them again. These are the Levites. They're the ones who they will become the priests. This is the priesthood of Yahweh. And so he's saying, okay, what about Aaron? And I'm saying, and what's interesting, he says, moreover, here I'll come back to the text so we could see it. It says, moreover, he's coming to meet you, and when he sees you, he'll be glad in his heart. And I've heard that taught like God had already told Aaron, and so Aaron was already on his way. But grammatically, it could be he's coming to you. He's going to be coming. So it doesn't have to be that. But it's interesting that God's like, okay, I'll take care of it. I'm going to send Aaron. Like,
Uh-huh.
yeah. So, so you've got that going on. And then you get the sort of the parameters around it. It says, so you are to speak to him, put words in his mouth. And as for me, I will put your words in his mouth. I'll teach you both what you must do. So God says, I'm going to give him the words to say, which is interesting again, because that could have just been Moses. But now he's got a sidekick.
Mm-hmm.
And this sidekick is going to be the one that speaks. So this is interesting because in everything that we see, every story, this part gets changed. I've never seen this actually referenced properly or shown properly or retold properly, but Aaron is the one who speaks. So Moses is like standing back there, and Aaron's the one that speaks to Pharaoh. Right?
It's a pretty funny image.
It is.
Like, why is he even here then? Like, why is it? I don't know. Like in Pharaoh's perspective.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and it's funny though, is that you have that scenario built here, but then later on, I'll just say like, and Moses said, like the writer just kind of cuts that part out. Just like, we're just going to go to this, but Aaron Aaron basically acts like the prophet for Moses. He's the one who goes and speaks. And we also get then that definition of what a prophet is. A prophet is just one who speaks for God, says the words that are given. Verse 17, you'll also take in your hand your staff with which you will do the signs. So the staff becomes the implement of a shepherd, becomes this really important focal point, a tool. That's a great word for it. It's just the tool that is used to show and to accomplish the things that God has.
Side note, later on in Israel's future, they worship that staff, and it becomes idolatrous. So it's just human nature, you know.
I think it's not his staff. I think it's Aaron's staff.
Either way, there's still again,
right.
always comes back to instead of worshiping God, they worship something else. Like it's like, oh my gosh, it wasn't the staff. God was using the staff. It was the tool.
Right. But then again, it's funny thing, because then again, it's Aaron that does a lot of those things. It's Aaron's staff that's put into the Ark of the Covenant. It's Aaron's staff that buds. It's Aaron's staff, not Moses' staff. Even though God will use Moses and Moses' staff to show these signs and wonders, it's Aaron's that gets used. It's almost like, sorry, Moses, you got left out of that deal. You bring your staff, you do this thing, but it's Aaron's that's going to be honored. But anyway.
It's funny with human nature. We love to worship. It's always going somewhere where it shouldn't be.
And that also, yeah, and you bring up a good point. Like a lot of these things become legendary. Like these acts, these things, this story becomes absolutely legendary in the life of an Israelite, right? And later on in the life of a Jew. It's this pinnacle story that they go back to. It is like they pattern so many different things from this particular story. And again, we've talked about this before, but this becomes one of the things that God uses to identify himself. Hey, I'm the God of your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I'm the one that took you all out of Egypt. It becomes part of his, like, how he's known. It's part of Yahweh's fame, who he is, that explanation of that, which is pretty cool. Like this story is so pivotal. So you can understand later on certain aspects, certain implements, certain tools become special, and they become so special, they become legendary, they become so legendary, become focal points of worship themselves. This thing, like it's the staff that did anything.
Yeah.
Right.
We still, hey, not to bring this up, but it's like gun issues. It's the gun. Like, no, maybe it's something else. Nope. It's the tool. Back to that. Always, the connection.
Yep. If you don't like something, you blame the tool, and if you didn't wield it properly, it's the tool, right? Oh man, I didn't make that putt because of this putter.
Yep.
That sort of thing. And full disclosure, I don't play golf. I just made the reference. Just want people to know that's not a part of my reputation.
Would you feel would that be a taint on your persona?
if people thought that I played golf, yeah,
change everything.
Maybe. Maybe it would change everything. No, I've got friends that try to have me play golf. I can't play golf. I can't play golf worth beans. I was actually pretty good at some putting back in the the putt golf.
Back in the little mini golf era.
Mini golf, the windmills. I had like a 1 year framework where, like, during this 1 year I was pretty good, and after that I lost it. Lost the magic.
What a shame. You could have made that a career, man.
I know, right? I know. Yeah. I'm gonna try to get my girls to play golf though, because the women's golf offers like full ride scholarships.
It's also a great sport for them because they can play that until they're 80 years old. So it's
true. Like Moses.
Yeah, exactly. Moses out there in Midian. That's why he didn't want to leave the desert, man. He had plenty of good golf courses out there with the sheep.
Probably. I mean, you're so bored out there shepherding. Yeah. I'm sure he built something out there.
See, that staff, he probably had like a little head at the end of the staff.
See, now it's in my mind it's turning into a putter or a driver or something. I don't know golf, but
I think his staff was multi-used.
Multi-purpose staff. Yeah,
the driver and a putter at the same time.
Driver and a putter and a snake.
Yep,
it's all the things. Now we get into some weirdness. First, we're going to get, we'll do this part here. So Moses went back to his father-in-law Jethro, basically told him, I have a new job offer. So I need to go return to my relatives in Egypt, which is interesting. He says, I need to go back and see that if they're still alive, which is that true?
No, it's like it's one of those like half truths, like lie type of deal.
Yeah, it's so fitting.
He knows they're still alive, like clearly.
Right. It's just like, I don't, yes, but not that.
It always goes back to those like half truth, half lies, like with Abraham and Sarah, right? Like technically it wasn't a lie, like that was his half sister, but it wasn't a full truth. You know, it's like
usually doesn't bode well, right? Yeah. I do have to say, hello, Bhaskar, Batman.
What's going on, man?
Good to see you. Glad you're here. So he gives this like kind of half truth. He's like, yeah, go ahead. Go in peace. Moses said, I'm sorry. The Lord said, Yahweh says to Moses and Midian, go back to Egypt, because all the men who are seeking your life are dead. So even more encouragement. In case this is something you were afraid of, everybody who's seeking your life is dead. So
Moses, you are so old now, you don't have to worry. Everyone has passed away.
You've outlived them all.
What a way to encourage them. You are so ancient.
You are
they have all died. There's a new generation.
So old. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's a new generation. They don't even know you, bro. You're fine.
And I got Mike the Shill over here. Mike the Shill Porter.
What's going on, Mike?
What's up? And so he's like, okay, everyone's dead, so go ahead and go back. And going to, I guess we do have more pilgrims in the chat. Maybe that's going to have to be the title. Just whatever pilgrim. It's a title. It's not a. Well, I won't get into that. But he says, go back to Egypt. Moses took his wife and his sons, put him on a donkey, headed back. Very specific about the donkey. I don't know.
It's always a donkey, man. I love the story with the Balaam. Was it Balaam?
Yeah.
With the donkey stopping. Like, I love that story so much, man.
I wonder if some of it is the terrain. I don't know. I'm not a donkologist. I don't know.
There has to be some use to them, obviously. There's something about them.
Yeah.
Or that's just what they had. Just like
what they found out there.
It's like Shrek had a donkey, right? Like he didn't get to choose. Like donkey just came to him. All right, he's a donkey.
You just brought in Shrek. I think that's amazing. I did not think that Shrek was going to enter the chat today. Howdy, pilgrims. Yeah, exactly. All right, so they're heading back, right? Heading back to Egypt, and Moses took the staff of God in his hand. Now it's interesting because now it's the staff of God. Which I don't think we highlight enough. Like these things, like God takes ownership of these things and uses them, right?
Mm-hmm.
We talk about it's Moses' staff, but Moses identifying this is the staff of God. And Yahweh says to Moses, when you get back to Egypt, see that you do before Pharaoh all the wonders that I've put under your control. This right here is interesting. God does this several times. He does this with Abraham. He does this with Isaiah. He does this with so many people. He says, I want you to go and I want you to do the thing that you're supposed to do, but I want you to know that it's going to not work. And I wonder if some of that is to sort of allow Moses to kind of deal with the fact that he's not going to have immediate success. I don't know. I don't know what the reason is behind this, but this happens several times. So he says here, go and do all these signs, right? So I'm sure Moses thinking, I do these signs. He says, oh, wow, that's pretty amazing. Yeah, go ahead. And what's going to happen is, it talks about it here in verse 21. It says, I'll harden his heart and he won't let the people go. Like, understand this. Remember, we talked about this last time where he says, make the offer and say, I want to go into the desert. I want to bring my people out. Yahweh is telling us to bring the nation out to this mountain to worship. That's reasonable. Mm-hmm. And remember, it said, but Pharaoh's going to say no. And it's in that rejection. When Pharaoh continues to reject, that's when Yahweh says, all right, then we're leaving. Then that's it. Then we're done. Taking my ball. I'm going home. And in this, he's saying, I'm going to harden Pharaoh's heart. So it's not going to work. Verse 22, you must say to Pharaoh, this is what Yahweh has said. Israel is my son, my firstborn. So he's telling him, he's like, you need to use this line. Okay. Now, of course, then Moses is going to tell Aaron and Aaron's going to do it. But he says, Israel is my son, my firstborn. And I said to you, let my son go that he may serve me. But since you refuse to let him go, then I will surely kill your son, your firstborn. So this is where we get that scenario of the firstborn. So right here, before he even leaves Midian, that is already set up. This is what we call in the biz foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Right?
But it's also payback for all the firstborn Israelite boys that were murdered. So
Exactly.
it's like God saying, "Hey, you reap what you sow, Egypt."
That's right. That's absolutely right. So you've got this thread that's going through this story here to make sure you understand that it's important, right? So now here we get into the story. They don't show this, and it's not in the kids' books. This is not in Prince of Egypt. This is not in Ten Commandments in this way. But look at this, verse 24. Now on the way, at a place where they stopped for the night, stopped at some motel, whatever, some lodging, says Yahweh met Moses and sought to kill him. What? What? So they go to stop, and then it says that Yahweh sought to kill him. Now I know in our minds when we hear that we feel like there's an assassin out to go and get him. But what also could be allowed is once they're there, Moses could have just gotten sick. Like it doesn't have to be this whole thing of like Yahweh's there running after him and he's running in the dark and stuff. And I'm sure that's where our if someone's making an action movie, they do it. This is the Michael Bay version where he's running around, Yahweh's chasing him. But so something's happening. The Lord is seeking to kill him. It says, but Zipporah, that's his wife, took a flint knife, and here we go. He cut off the foreskin of her son. It says, and touched it to Moses' feet, which is most likely her taking it and in anger throwing it at his feet. It says, surely you're a bridegroom of blood to me. So the Lord let him alone. At that time, she said a bridegroom of blood, referring to the circumcision. So what happens is on the way, they're leaving. This is the how I think it fits in here. So they're going on their way. Moses says bye. They all wave goodbye, and they're all leaving like everything's fine. But Yahweh knows that Moses has not even been faithful to him in these particular ways. So Moses is out in the wilderness of Midian, and when he's bringing up his children, he does not even accomplish the things that he knows that he needs to do as a Hebrew. So we already have in the story, he's identified himself as a Hebrew. He knows he's a Hebrew. He's willing to kill for that, but he's not even willing to lead his own family like he's actually a part of the covenant.
Yep.
Circumcision was something that was delivered to Abraham as a sign that you are part of this. So you're part of this covenant. He did not even accomplish this. This is supposed to be done on the 8th day of a baby boy's life, right? Which there's a whole thing on why the 8th day and medically, and which is pretty cool. And we don't have to get into all of that. Let's just say if it's not the 8th day when you're a baby boy, it's pretty intense. And that's usually where you stay. Intense. Because you're not doing anything for a while after you've been circumcised, if you're an adult, which at this point, Moses is 80. How old is his son? It doesn't say, but he's not a baby.
No. I can only imagine that fight. What are you doing? What are you doing? Stop it.
But it's interesting because it wasn't Moses, it was his wife. His wife, this is how you know that Moses knew what he was doing, because how in the world would a Midianite woman know that part of that covenant unless he had already told her these things?
Yeah.
This is something that they had discussed. Who knows how that conversation went? Maybe she was the one who's like, I don't want that happening to my baby. And he's like, all right, whatever. So didn't really see it as important enough to actually highlight. But this was enough for Yahweh to say, like, this is a deal breaker. Like, I'm going to kill you because you're not taking this seriously. You're not taking me seriously. You're not taking the covenant seriously. How in the world can you stand before Pharaoh and say, let my people go? Like, you're serious about the firstborn son of Israel, and you're not even serious about your own firstborn son. Like,
Yeah.
what a hypocrite.
Yep.
And God calls him on it.
Yep.
Which again almost gives that same idea that you get later on with Joshua, right? The angel of the Lord shows up. Are you for us? Or are you for our enemies? He's like, no.
Yeah, I love that. Like,
I'm above all that.
yeah.
I'm the angel of the Lord. I do what's right, period. It doesn't matter whose side is on whose, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, it's such a weird story. It's not brought up a whole lot because people don't really know what to do with it. It sounds gross. You have to talk about foreskins and blood and all that kind of stuff. Bridegroom of Blood is, I think, one of the best titles for. I should have called this stream Bridegroom of Blood.
That'd
Bet you would have a lot of people joining.
That'd be a good metal Christian band name.
Yeah, Bridegroom of Blood. Jeez Louise. But yeah.
Fitting.
There you go. Yeah, it's pretty intense. So there's that. That thing happened. And there are a lot of people who, a lot of scholars who think that at that point, I didn't ask all the scholars, so I don't know how many actually. But Zippor doesn't show up again in the story really till much, much, much later. And so the thought is at this point, like, okay, maybe you guys just all go back to Midian and I'll go on myself. So there's some people who think that they just went back to Midian. That's a pretty weird and difficult argument to overcome. So maybe they're like, let's deal with this later. I'm going to go do the Egypt thing and I'll be back. We'll talk about it. So yeah, it need to be back in a matter of weeks, I do believe. So it wasn't that long, but there you go. Yeah. Weird. Just to say that, just weird.
Anytime circumcision comes up, it can get weird, but once you understand what circumcision stands for and the meaning, especially with like the past verse talking about Pharaoh's heart being hardened because his heart is not circumcised, obviously what circumcision stands for. So like, but yeah, anytime you get into circumcision, it gets to in our 21st century mindsets, we're like, what? Kind of weird. What's going on?
Yeah, and it's important to kind of bring up like this was done for a specific reason back then. Like, yeah, that's it. That's what does make this weird to talk about now. And we'll just say it. We'll be honest. It's weird.
Honestly,
it's a weird thing.
When I thought it was really weird, right? But then God showed me like the meaning of what circumcision stands for. Like, obviously, because you have the outward appearance of the physical flesh being circumcised, but then he always compares it to the heart being circumcised. And with that in mind, you can then compare the heart. Imagine having a heart that has a foreskin over it that then gets filled with sin, which is an infection, which obviously if you have a foreskin, if you don't bathe yourself or wash, you're open to infection down there, which that would be symbolism of sin. So that's why God circumcises your heart, cleanses that. So then you are now cleansed from that sin, symbolically meaning. Also, again, showing that you are distinct and you are separated from the Gentiles, from everyone else in the world. I mean, again, back then that was a surefire way. Oh, that's an Israelite, and that's different.
But as I brought up before, it's not like you introduce yourself and then lift your kilt. You know, it's a very like. So that's the other side of this. Is Moses could have definitely passed himself off as like, yeah, I've done everything. I did the thing. I also don't think they were wearing kilts, but you know what I mean. Like it's cool like. Yeah, now it's Braveheart, which is neat. That's a pretty cool thing. So let's finish up. Oh, look, I got rid of you on accident.
Oh, yeah. Boop. Actually, I didn't mind that. I'd rather just be a voice.
Just be a voice booming. But yeah, and Mike, a couple comments. Yeah, that sounds intense. It is intense, and the analogy makes sense. And I think that's something to remember is. These are pictures. Like even though circumcision was a physical thing that's done, it was pointing to something else, and it was pointing to that time where circumcision would be of the heart. Like that's why we're not mandated to have to circumcise our kids now, because the harder thing is to have someone who lives as though their heart is of the covenant, right? So that's but that analogy is very thankful, and thanks for bringing that aspect up as well.
No problem.
And looking at verse 27, Yahweh said to Aaron, go into the wilderness and meet Moses. And that's why I kind of think it's not necessarily like Aaron's on his way. Like I knew you were going to be a dill. Go into the wilderness and meet Moses. And so he went to go meet him at the mountain of God, greeted him with a kiss. So It says Moses told Aaron all the words that Yahweh had sent to him and all the signs that he commanded to him. And Moses and Aaron went and brought together all the Israelite elders. So again, this is another reason why it sort of feels like they went back. Aaron then goes and meets him. Then the two of them go on, and Moses' family is still back there. Aaron spoke all the words the Lord had spoken to Moses and did the signs inside of the people. And all the people believed when they heard that Yahweh had attended to Israelites and had seen their affliction and bowed down close to the ground. So you have Aaron now apart. So going back to our title, Aaron definitely in this scenario, if Moses is the hero, Aaron does feel like the sidekick. He comes in, he kind of helps him to accomplish the things that he's doing here. But just like in any Batman story, Batman's the hero, and who cares what Robin did? Sort of how that story rolls out. Which is also, it should be analogous of how the prophets worked, right? We shouldn't highlight the prophet. We should highlight God who's speaking through the prophet. So it does kind of fit, right? It fits that kind of scenario, and that's what we kind of see there. But sidekicks, I mean, everybody, if we talked about this before, if everyone is the hero of their own story, that means that other people come alongside are kind of those sidekicks, right? They kind of get overlooked, but they come alongside and they help you to accomplish those things that you're supposed to have. And I think if we think about it, you know, we do have people who come alongside who God uses to help us to accomplish things that he called us to do. So even if you are in your weakness and God's calling you to do something, God is going to make sure that you have what you need to accomplish the goals that God has placed in front of you.
So it's cool too with that. With this whole sidekick thing, like obviously in the sense of Moses, yeah, he's the sidekick, but in our own lives, we are a sidekick to somebody else as they are a sidekick to us. It's not like we are the main hero and they are this addition. We are also their sidekick to their addition. And it goes to how God always sends us out with two, a pair. And you have Paul and Timothy, you know, you have Moses and Aaron here, you got David and Jonathan. There's always a pair of two. There's strength in that. I think it's Ecclesiastes 4:9, how two is better than one. You have iron sharpens iron. It's really important. It's always critical that you have Elijah and Elias. I don't know. I always mess up how to pronounce
Elijah and Elijah.
Yeah, and even though they weren't like walking out together, but like again, it's it's critical to know that like in our walk, we need our brothers in Christ or sisters in Christ. It's always critical to have that other person or multiple, right? But again, the idea of the sidekick, you can't do this alone. God knows Moses could not do it alone. He knows that you can't do this life alone. He can't walk with the Lord alone in the sense of you need brothers and sisters. You need that companionship, especially if you're going out to the world and you have this great journey you're going on like Moses has. I don't know what your journey may be, the individual watching this, but you have some type of walk or journey or destiny that God has set for you, whatever it is personally to you, but you can't do it alone. Obviously, you need God to go in front of you, but you also need a partner, a companion in the walk that will encourage you, strengthen you, God, just everything, build you up. It is critical.
Absolutely. Mike Porter, sidekicks are important too for God's glory. Actually, there are some times that we need to be sidekicks and sometimes we need to be the heroes. And it's so important to highlight, because I think it's easy for us to be deceived, to deceive ourselves into thinking, in order for me to be the hero, I have to use people. And we probably wouldn't think of it that way or say it that way. But in order for us to accomplish the things that we're supposed to do, the world, everything outside of this story would say, in order for you to achieve power, you step on someone else's head, right? That's how you stand up higher. And this is the exact opposite. The exact opposite of that is you help other people. You come alongside when you are expected to come alongside someone else. The whole point is to help uplift them. You lift them up and to accomplish that. And that is, it's backwards, but by helping to lift someone else up, you become great. Right. And it goes back to the teaching of Jesus where he says, in order for you to be the master, you must be the servant of all. Right. Yep. So if you're going to be like Jesus says, be like me in this way. And then he served everyone. He washed their feet. Right. He's the example of this, where he is the great one, but he lifts up other people. He comes alongside other people. Mm-hmm. So it's something to really think about when you are in your own life, just walking around like you should be the hero of your own story, right? And I only say that because sometimes we sort of forget. We make ourselves an ancillary character that everything is just happening to you. But it's like, you need to live the life that you have, that you need to take the opportunities that God has given you, because you have, if God has called you, you have a task to accomplish. You have things you're supposed to do. But in light of that, as we walk, as we go through life, we're also called to come alongside others. Like they also have something they're supposed to go into to do and to accomplish. That might be greater than us. That might be less than us. That might be one of the reasons why there are like mentorship sort of relationships don't happen all that often in a lot of people's lives today, because mentors are afraid sometimes. Mentors are afraid that who they mentee, who they build into, is going to be greater than them.
And that's, it goes back to the humility thing. That should be your desire. You should want that as a mentor. Right. That shows that you were a good mentor. Like, yeah, right on. Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, again, goes back to Elijah's, or that's how do you? I always
Elijah,
because you have Elijah and then you have Elijah.
Elijah and Elisha.
Elisha had the double, not the double blessing, but the double pouring out. He did twice as much as Elijah, even though there's less written about him. Again, back to the idea, like you actually want your pupil, someone under you, to surpass you. I mean, that's the goal.
Yeah, at the end of the movie, it was Rocky that was lifted up, but really without his coach, like he would not have ever made it, right?
Yeah.
And it was enough for that coach to look up and to just be happy that Rocky was the one who received all the accolades, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of fitting, like at the end of that movie, he doesn't yell out a coach's name. He yells out Adrian, who pretty much did nothing the entire movie.
Pretty, yeah. But good little Rocky reference.
Yeah, there you go. I love Rocky. It's great.
Oh, yeah.
Still a great pump-up song.
It is. Oh, absolutely, man. It's a great
Rocky theme. And with that, I think we start to draw this to a close. So we're on the move. Our story is progressing. We're moving. Next week, we'll continue this, and we'll see where we go from here. But they are on their way to go in to meet Pharaoh. So, yeah, and if you haven't watched all the different parts of this series, go back and take a look at that. But, Chuman, last words? Anything? You're not dying. I'm just saying.
No. That wouldn't be the worst thing to be with the Lord, right? But
it's true.
No. But
probably not today.
Last words would just be humility. That's the key to life, really. Don't take yourself too serious. Don't take things of this world too serious. Knowing your deficiencies, but knowing that the Lord will provide wherever you are deficient, as long as you are in His will. Obviously, if you're doing something wacky in your own life selfishly, then obviously He's not going to take care of that. But if you are trying to walk in His will, walk where He wants you, even if you are deficient, He will guide you in whatever way. So stay humble.
And with that, I'll say to everyone, thanks for joining. And if you're watching this on the restream or just as a video, let us know what you thought. Drop it in the comments. Let's have a conversation if you want to. But until then, Pilgrim on, my friends, we'll see you out there.
God bless.